Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host DD, and joining me once again today is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be reviewing the Styrian GP. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions, and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant, and the blows just keep on coming for Mercedes. Red Bull extending their lead in the Constructors' Championship by another 3 points, I think, after the Styrian GP, and it seems like the momentum is headed Red Bull's way. What were your thoughts on the weekend?
I think it this weekend just defines the season because Red Bull were pretty dominant throughout the weekend, especially Max Verstappen absolutely acing the race and getting pole, and Mercedes really not really there to fight back. And Toto Wolff said that this was the first time in 8 years that they were not that Mercedes did not have the pace to fight for the win.
Absolutely, they didn't have the pace to challenge at all. With Lewis finishing, you could say about 18 seconds behind Verstappen at the end of the race. Accounting for the pit stop delay and everything. So definitely, it just seemed like Mercedes were way off the pace.
Yeah, definitely. It's again. I mean, Red Bull are the team to beat this season.
Absolutely, and I think another interesting stat coming out of this weekend was this was the first time in the turbo hybrid era that Mercedes have not they have gone without a win 4 races in a row. So that was an interesting stat too, and we already mentioned this, but it was really weird. Like I think to see Mercedes just accept the fact that they couldn't do better than P2 even like before we were like midway through the race. Like we just knew that they won't be competing for the win today, and they'll just be settling for damage limitation or however many points they could get, which I guess worked out because Bottas did finish ahead of Perez after Red Bull botched Perez's pit stop. I think it was like a 4.8 second pit stop, and
Yeah.
Mercedes reacted instantly, allowing Bottas to uh, you know o- overcut Perez essentially. But we also have to think about the fact that even though like Perez was there where Red Bull wanted them to be, this weekend both Bottas and Perez were really off the pace too. The second drivers in both the World Championship contending teams. So much so that Lewis was able to make a free pit stop at the end of the race and grab that extra World Championship point for fastest lap. So as much as Perez has made inroads with the Red Bull team, and he is where people are saying Red Bull wants him to be. If you really look at it, if it came down to a strategy battle between Hamilton and Verstappen this weekend, Mercedes might have been able to attack Verstappen, unlike how it was in France, because Perez was not there to help Verstappen cover the pit stop and possibly defend against Hamilton if they were to pit. So I think there's still a lot of work that Perez needs to do to be on race pace with Max and the way he's pushing the car.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even Bottas, he has not been on top of his game throughout the season. He has been struggling here and there, and as you said, Lewis could make an extra pit stop even without Bottas having to let him by, and so that just shows both the second drive. I mean, the first drivers in both the teams are running on top of the game, and are absolutely perfect, and the second drivers are fluctuating here and there. So it's just a matter of who performs better at a given weekend and which team can extract most out of its two drivers and get that edge in strategy.
Absolutely, and another interesting comment coming out of the paddock from Toto Wolff this weekend was that Mercedes have stopped developing this car. Now, I don't know how much I believe Toto Wolff in general, but from the lack of pace that Mercedes showed this weekend, I'm willing to believe that Mercedes have stopped developing the car as much as Red Bull have, and I feel and I think like Mercedes has been raising questions about the engine upgrades that Honda have brought to Austria and like to France when they brought in reliability upgrades, and they have questioned the fact whether they haven't just brought reliability upgrade, but they have also brought along performance upgrades, which is not allowed according to the rules for this season because the engine is supposed to be homologated for the entire season. and that is something that has been brought into question. And Max and both Christian Horner have had a strong response to it. And I think Max came out and said pretty loudly that basically, I'll give everyone a printout of the Red Bull rear wing. It is the Red Bull rear wing that has allowed us to perform so much better. And I think that battle will go on until Mercedes can figure out a way to object against, whatever technology that Red Bull are bringing in. Just like the way they did for Ferrari, a couple years ago when they objected to the fuel flow when Red Bull went to F1 and they were like, hey, can we do this? And they basically pointed out what they thought Ferrari might have been doing, which brought about a technical directive, and then Ferrari lost some performance. So I think it's a matter of time before Mercedes are able to figure out what Red Bull are doing. But again, we've talked about this before, but the strategic battle between, developing this year's car and next year's car will play out in some way throughout the course of the season, and it'll be interesting to see how Red Bull respond to the lack of performance that Mercedes have. Will Red Bull, slow down their development for this year once they have, a good cushion going into the summer break during the course of this season?
Yeah, I mean, assuming for Mercedes have stopped their development this season now, so we have another 3 races before the summer break, right? And I believe those 3 races, I mean, summer break would be the ideal time for Red Bull to stop their development because they'll have a good cushion and they can focus on the next year's car more. But again, I mean, we have seen this from Red Bull as we talked about in 2013, and as we talked about earlier in earlier podcast, when Red Bull essentially put all their resources for that 2013 car and Mercedes took away the 2014 regulations in perfect form. So I mean, we have seen a different Red Bull this season where they have come out fighting from the first race onwards. So hopefully we'll see a different Red Bull at the end of the season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but while all of this is playing out, we should not forget that this season will be one for the history books, and we should enjoy it while it is unfolding. There is so much drama happening, not just amongst the drivers, but in the paddock across all teams, and this hasn't happened in a long, long time. And we should really, really enjoy it as much as we can as Formula One fans. But looking down the order, talking about Ferrari and McLaren, Ferrari finally having a good weekend, an unlikely one because after coming out of France, the expectations were really low from Ferrari. But finishing P6 and P7, especially Charles Leclerc's recovery drive was fabulous after an unlikely incident with Pierre Gasly. But Ferrari seemed to have really good pace this weekend, so much so that I think that had Charles not had that incident during the first lap, they might have even challenged for P5, and we might have seen Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc go toe-to-toe throughout the entire race.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he came back to P7, which was essentially the maximum he could have done after that first lap incident. So without that incident, you can argue that they would have been P5, definitely. But again, I mean, Carlos Sainz himself had quite good pace during the second stint. I mean, he was able to unlap himself from Lewis Hamilton, and Lewis Hamilton was essentially slowing him down, and he could not pursue Lando Norris for P5. But
absolutely,
again, interesting couple of weekends for Ferrari. Quite a change from last weekend, and as we have the next race in Austria as well, they'll be very optimistic for a good result there.
Absolutely, and I'll be optimistic too as a Ferrari fan. But this only goes to show how important a role, like F1 fans hate talking about tires, but this just goes to show how important a role tires play in an F1 weekend. I think Carlos was talking about how I think the next weekend in Austria they go on softer tires. I think it's C1, C2 and C3 compound instead of C2, C3 and C4. And Carlos was quick to point out in the post-race interview that Ferrari might struggle a little more. They might not have as much long-run pace because the Ferrari does not do well on softer tires in warmer temperatures compared to harder tires in general. But coming from France, another thing we learned about Ferrari in general was that it did not do well on low grip surfaces where it could not, generate core tire temperatures.
Yeah.
So I think that is another thing that Ferrari will be looking into, especially for the 2022 season. And but I think they'll have to wait, I guess, because again, I forgot that the tires are changing in the 2022 season, so it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. But that's a long way away, so let's not talk about that. But Ferrari, uh, reclaiming 4 points in the gap between them and McLaren. McLaren having a decent weekend as usual. Norris being Mr. Consistent once again in Austria. He loves that track, and I'm pretty sure he thoroughly enjoyed having a lonely race in Austria, not being troubled by anyone else. But talking about Daniel Ricciardo, he had a great start. He went from P13 to P8 in the very first lap, and then he had a power loss issue about 10 laps into the race, and then he could never recover from it. It seemed like he didn't have pace once he lost power, whether it was on the mediums or on the hard tires. He just didn't have the pace to attack the cars in front of him. He was struggling to overtake, I think, Kimi Räikkönen in his Alpha.
Yeah, I mean, even on Saturday, in practice and in qualifying, he was nowhere near Ferrari or Lando Norris. And I mean, he qualified P13, if I remember correctly. And even Saturday morning in practice, he was P15, 17 or something like that. So, and I mean, Friday, they were quick. They were showing pace on Friday. And Ricciardo himself said that he hated the sport on Sunday, and they are not really sure where that issue came from, because they didn't make a lot of changes for Saturday, and even if they would have made changes, they could have figured it out that okay, we changed this and we lost pace, but they have not essentially figured it out or publicly told us that they have figured it out. But with the next race in Austria as well, again, the theme goes, 2 races in Austria, teams can improve with the knowledge they gained this weekend. So yeah, hopefully.
Absolutely, it'll be a good comparison for Daniel Ricciardo to go back on track and see what he can do differently. But he did seem out of sorts. He seemed really puzzled in the post-race interview, especially both after qualifying and after the race. And he didn't really have any answers for himself, or from the technical side of things. But definitely, heartbreaking to see Daniel Ricciardo struggle so much in a new car where we just wanted him to, just be on pace from the get-go. So we can only hope, but we'll see what happens. Talking about AlphaTauri, disappointing for Pierre Gasly once again. DNF probably is second or third of the season, not helping AlphaTauri's, because I feel Gasly had the pace to grab some great points this weekend, especially after qualifying. And we know that AlphaTauri, in the AlphaTauri car in general, has they don't have bad tire deck. They're usually good in the race space, and overall, it's a good package. Their performance doesn't vary too much from weekend to weekend, and we saw that Tsunoda finished 10th even after that quali penalty he got for impeding Bottas. He started P11, finished P10. So again, I think AlphaTauri left a lot of points on the table, but again, it was just unfortunate for Pierre Gasly to get entangled with Charles out of turn 1.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that incident was 50-50 on both their sides, because Charles was moving towards the right to gain slipstream from Gasly, and Gasly was going towards the left, and they clashed. So very unfortunate for Gasly, because he has the pace, as you said, and having not being able to fully utilize that and show their potential weekend and like every other weekend is quite disencouraging for them. But talking about Yuki Tsunoda, he moved to Italy to be near the factory and gain more knowledge and perform better. And he had talked about changing his mentality and changing his the way he goes about things, being calmer and taking a step at a time. And I think that is paying off slowly and surely. Yeah, I mean, he might not compete with Gasly outright, but as progress goes, he's slowly growing, definitely.
Absolutely, and that goes to show, the kind of environment that AlphaTauri is and why AlphaTauri is such a good place for Red Bull Juniors to come and grow within Formula One, and why they need time. And if you draw parallels, both Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon spent a year or less in that AlphaTauri seat before moving to Red Bull. And they didn't have that growth time. They didn't have that time to settle down into F1 to learn the ways. And they were thrown into a team that was just results oriented. They didn't have someone like Franz Tost and that support staff around them to help them understand what was going wrong and what they could do differently. And I think it took someone like Sergio Perez, who had over I think like 7-8 years of experience in Formula One, to get into that Red Bull seat and finally start performing, start to be somewhat on pace within the first 6-7 races. And I think there is a lesson for Red Bull that all us fans and all the other pundits have been talking about, that you got to give those juniors a little more time. Yes, there are world championship talents like Max Verstappen and even like Daniel Ricciardo to some extent, who could come in and be on pace from the get-go. And that is the kind of team that Red Bull is. But at the same time, if you have a junior driver development program, not everyone is the same, and you have to cater to their needs somewhat, and while also building your own team. So again, lessons for both the drivers, in this case Yuki Tsunoda and AlphaTauri and Red Bull. But still maintaining their lead over Aston Martin. Aston Martin had a quiet weekend too, getting a couple 4 points with Lance Stroll finishing 8th. Kind of disappointing from Sebastian Vettel after 2 great weekends in Baku and after 3 great weekends in Monaco, Baku and France, scoring points in all 3 races. But this time didn't seem to have enough pace on those tires throughout the race. Couldn't challenge for any overtakes or anything, but hopefully he'll bounce back next weekend.
Yeah, Aston Martin have again been a kind of fluctuating story this season. You never know, like, they have been brilliant with their strategies going long with that first stint, but I believe they have not fully tapped their potential, because since it is essentially a carryover from last year, this season's cars, and the pace we saw from Racing Point last year, I mean, there should be some comparison, right? And I mean, Sebastian is new to the team, so we can give him an excuse. But even Lance Stroll has not been able to tap into that potential and bring home results. So definitely a lot of plus points for Lance Stroll, because he got into points and qualified well. But they still need to move up to compete with Alpine, because Alpine is growing right now. Fernando Alonso, and even though Ocon is struggling, Alpine is still improving every weekend.
Yeah, Fernando did have a good race. Towards the end of the first stint, he was definitely falling away on those softs. He didn't have any pace, and he was falling through the grid. And then Alpine did, did stop him pretty early in the race. But great race pace from Fernando in the second stint. I think Fernando really enjoys the hard tires, because we saw even in France, Fernando didn't have the pace on the tires he started on as they started to fall away. But once he switched to those hard tires, he had really good pace in that Alpine car. So definitely, the Alpine car is somewhat like the Ferrari, where it loves to, be on the hard tires, especially the way Fernando drives it. But talking about Esteban Ocon, he signs that 3-year contract with Alpine last weekend, and it's been downhill ever since. What is going on with him? I haven't heard any post-race interviews or any interviews with Esteban recently over the last couple of weekends, but I'd like to go back and see some of those clips and see what he has to say about his race weekends, because this is really disheartening. But hopefully, with another Grand Prix at the A1 ring or the Red Bull ring, whatever you want to call it, Esteban will be able to make some inroads and figure out what is going on with his performance in the car.
Yeah, I mean, Ocon is definitely struggling over the past few weekends, but having heard the interviews and the reports, as with Daniel Ricciardo, there doesn't seem to be a solution, or in the public space what's going on. So I mean, we can't only see, but Fernando said that obviously Ocon didn't suddenly forget how to drive right after signing the contract. So it's about getting things back together and essentially just making full use of the understanding the problems and rectifying them. So hopefully, as we said earlier, another race in Red Bull Ring, So yeah, improvements are
And
expected.
talking about Fernando coming to the rescue of Esteban there, we've seen a different Fernando ever since he's made his comeback to Formula One. We haven't seen him complain about the Alpine car at all, and it just seems that with
Yeah,
2 years off, outside Formula One, Fernando has grown somewhat. He's calmed down a little bit. He's still aggressive. He's still the same racer that we used to know. But as a person, as a personality, he's grown a little bit, and he's not as hard-headed or as aggressive with his teammates. And I don't know how to put it. It just seems like it's a much happier Fernando in that Alpine car somehow. And
I mean,
we hope to see him do
yeah,
better.
he's competing for points almost every race, right? With McLaren, he was not, so that definitely makes a man happy. But yeah, he definitely did gain a lot of appreciation, even for midfield teams, for that matter, in Formula One, right?
Absolutely. And looking at the bottom of the grid, not much from Alfa Romeo this weekend, but total disappointment for Williams. So what a performance by George Russell to put it P11 in qualifying, and then starting P10 with a free tire choice in the race. But that pneumatic pressure issue really spoiled the weekend. And I think George Russell also said after his qualifying run, or after FP3, he said that they were sixth fastest on race pace simulations after based on what the data said from the free practice sessions, and he hoped to score the points. And from how the weekend was looking in general, it did seem like this was the best chance George Russell has had simply on merit, to score some points during a race weekend. And just disheartening for not just George Russell and Williams, but for all of us F1 fans who've been wanting him to score some points in that Williams car. It's been 45, 46 races that he's gone pointless in that car now.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about F1 fans wanting George to score, and I texted you when George retired that the entire F1 community has jinxed Russell's chance for scoring points. But I mean, super disheartening to see that. And even he qualified P11, but that was only by 8 thousandths of a second. Yeah, that is super close. That is as close as it can get, right? And then he was running P8 at a point when Leclerc and Gasly crashed.
Collided, yeah.
Yeah. So that would have given him 4 points, and that would have put Williams 8th in the championship.
Ahead of Alfa Romeo, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that is huge money, huge sums of money for the championship standings. But unfortunately, I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say.
It just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, see, and I was thinking that okay, what does a man like Russell,
George Russell.
Yeah, what does go through his head when you fail to get into Q3 by 8,000 of a second?
But I think as fans, although we're always talking about George Russell and him moving to Mercedes, sometimes he goes under the radar, and how we judge his performances becomes difficult because he's in that Williams car. But I think it's days like these, performances like these that goes to show, especially to us fans, the teams know the data and the teams know that George is doing well or he's improving or whatever. But to us as fans, these performances go on to show that George is improving in that car, that George is he is still developing himself as an F1 driver. His career is not stagnant. His skills are not stagnant. He is, improving. He's progressing in his own way in that Williams car. And that when he does step into whatever the next car is, whether that's a Mercedes, it's an Aston Martin, whatever the next step in his career is, he's going to be a better driver, a more complete driver when he makes that change, when he makes that step up. So I think for all the George Russell fans out there, I think there's a lot of positive that they can take from this weekend and George Russell's performance.
Yeah, I mean,
but talking.
Yeah,
sorry.
As you said, he's still growing, and it gets difficult to judge him because he's in a Williams, and that is why I believe Toto Wolff is taking so long to make his decision for next season, because comparing Valtteri Bottas and George Russell is not easy because they are in completely different cars at definitely two ends of the grid. So they can't be compared directly. And
Absolutely. But hopefully we'll see George Russell in a championship contending car pretty soon. But talking about the last team on the grid, Haas. Not a lot from them this weekend, but a lot of memes coming out of that paddock with Gunther Steiner gifting Mazepin. I don't exactly remember what it was.
Yeah, it was a spinning top.
Okay, yeah, as a meme to him spinning every other race. But again, and then Mick's seat issue. Apparently, Mick did not inform the team that he was having a somewhat difficult time in his seat. Sitting in a crooked position. Mick did comment that he didn't tell the team because his performance was not being affected by the crooked seating position. But the meme being that it was Mick's mom who had to inform Gunther Steiner about this issue, and that Mick was uncomfortable in the seat. And then people comparing this to students having problem, their moms reporting it to the school headmaster instead of the students talking for themselves. So
I mean,
quite a funny weekend, I guess.
Yeah, he told Seb Vettel about that, and I think Seb talked to his mom and gave his mom some tips on how to do, like how to break the seat so you could get a new one. And so Mick is learning a lot of things from Seb. And we saw after Austria, Mick became sort of
Inspector
a deputy to Inspector Seb when he was checking out McLaren's car. So interesting.
Absolutely. So Mick definitely learning all the tips and tricks from Sebastian Vettel in Formula One, checking out the McLaren car. But that was all from this weekend. But in other F1 news, the Russian GP will be moving to Igorot Drive from Sochi. It will be a new circuit outside St. Petersburg in 2023. So that's exciting news in my opinion. Formula One is not going. I guess it is kind of going to new places, but a lot of new circuits coming up in the in the recent future. We'll have Miami. We're gonna have St. Petersburg now. We'll be going to Jeddah this year, hopefully. So a lot of new things. Vietnam sadly did get cancelled. Zandvoort, yes, absolutely. That's coming up pretty soon. So a lot of new circuits in Formula One and a lot of new exciting things happening. But talking about new things, what is your opinion of the new directive regarding the pit stop regulations issued by the FIA?
I mean, it's strange. It's super strange. I mean, see, I get where the FIA is coming from and what their reasoning is, but they could regulate it in a better way, in my opinion.
So, first of all, the regulations are not public because it was an FIA directive. The nitty gritty of whatever the FIA said is only known to the teams, and we only know bits and pieces that they have specified some minimum times that have to be met between specific actions, whether that is between the cars coming to a stop and the jackman lifting up the car, whether it's between the wheel nut coming off and the tire being taken off, or whatever those are. There's some minimum times that are specified by the FIA saying that this is what it should, this is what a normal human reaction time should be like. But firstly, before even talking about the FIA and their directive and where they're coming from, let's talk about the teams that protested. I think it was like Mercedes, and then McLaren came out and said that FIA did the right thing. But why would you do that? You are a team that's I guess in F1 it has always been the tradition that if you can't make yourself faster, you slow other teams down. So is it one of those things? Because F1, we've talked about this over and over again. F1 is based on innovation. F1 is about finding those margins and being the fastest team out there. And it's about those fine margins, those little things, the gray areas, the weird innovations. And why would you do that? And then FIA, instead of, and I don't think there's in the directive it doesn't specify, from what I heard from Sam Collins in the Tech Talk and Craig Scarborough. FIA hasn't specified how they'll be monitoring these times between various actions. That'll be interesting to see too. But again, why would you do that? And I get if you want to increase the human element in the sport, why would FIA, like you said, they could have done it in a better way. Why would you specify times? Maybe you could homologate the pit stop equipment. Maybe you could do that. Maybe you could ban all the sensors, because I think there's a clause that says you can't use X and Y sensors and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot more that FIA can do, and I think this FIA directive that has been issued as a result of the protest by Mercedes or whichever teams went to the FIA regarding this issue. I think it's a little bit hasty coming from Michael Massey, and I think that the FIA could have taken a little bit more time to, go in and, actually, I guess, research or, analyze, the safety concerns and, the issues that have happened over the course of the last few years, or all other aspects of, the pit stop equipment and the way the pit stops happen, to come up with a better solution. Because I think Sam Collins mentioned in the Tech Talk too that NASCAR used like an automated system in their pit lane to update the officials, like the stewards, about any infractions that might have happened during pit stops, because it's impossible to monitor 40 odd cars in the pit stop, which will also be the case for Michael Massey and his stewards. They won't be able to monitor all pit stops during the course of the race. So are they going to take another couple of hours after the race to finally because
check back every
exactly every pit stop? Because even now at the end of the race you have like the you have the classification, but it's not like the end result, and then the FIA go through the race and make sure that there are no penalties or any other incidents that had to be investigated. So they make sure that all of that has been taken care of, and then they come out with a formal or a final classification. So will that take longer at the end of each race now with these directives being issued? So I think there's a lot more that both the FIA and the teams can do, and I think Ferrari and a couple other teams came out against what FIA had done, and they said, hey, instead of issuing technical directives without talking to us, I think it will be better if all the teams could come together and come up with a solution instead of just making these hasty decisions once again.
Yeah, I mean, it was, as a lot of people said, it was a typical schoolboy snitching incident, presumably by Mercedes, because see, Red Bull are the fastest pit stop team in Formula 1 by far. They get 1.8, 1.9 seconds pit stop as a usual, and a Mercedes stop typically takes 2.1 or 2.2 seconds. So that is 2/10 of a second. Now it wouldn't affect them in a longer run, but it definitely does affect them making undercuts,
making adjustments to their pit stop procedures and things like that. It definitely upsets the rhythm of the people who are in the team.
Teams like McLaren and Gunter Steiner said, Haas and all these teams will not have to make any adjustment. Only Red Bull and presumably Williams, because Williams is another fast pit stop team. Only these two will have to make an adjustment. But as I said, the regulation states that there should be no automated element allowed. Now, with the minimum times, they can still be automated elements, because 2/10 of a second is the minimum time when the 2/10 elapse.
You could be playing with those margins. Absolutely, you're right.
So
like you could still be using those sensors to meet those specified times,
exactly,
and be as exact as possible with those times.
So definitely not the right decision, and definitely not the right way to take it.
Absolutely. Hopefully, obviously these teams do have regular meetings with the FIA and with each other, so hopefully they'll come up with a better solution, because overall this was just disappointing in general, the whole issue. But I think that was all from F1 this weekend, and let's just talk about W Series before we close out this podcast.
Yeah, so W Series had their first race of the season in Austria, with Alice Powell winning and picking up where she left off in 2019, where she won the last race of the season. Sarah Moore was second, and Fabienne Volvend, if I'm pronouncing that right, was third. There was some incident late in the race, and Jamie Chadwick made a brilliant recovery drive to P7. And interestingly though, and we are sorry that we couldn't cover this in our W Series preview podcast, that W Series has now moved to a team structure, and it was only announced after we had recorded that podcast. So,
but yeah, talking about the teams, right now W Series has sponsorship for 4 teams, and those 4 teams are sponsored by Veloce, Puma, M Forbes, and the Bunker. I'm not sure who that is or what that is. But apparently it's like a private club in the Beverly Hills. But we'll get more information on that next time we come on the podcast. But more news is that there'll be a full team structure from 2022 onwards. However, currently the W Series structure is the same as usual. When we are talking about teams, these are just sponsors with different liveries who on the car. So I think the sponsors get to choose who the drivers want to be, and they just simply they're just sponsoring the livery and giving money to W Series to run the series. Everything else, the way they go about the fact that W Series was a pure spec series still remains true, and nothing has changed in the way that W Series functions. High-Tech GP is still managing all the drivers and all the cars and the technical side of things. So there's nothing that has changed in that aspect. But it'll be interesting to see if those things change going into 2022 season. However, the season has just started, so let's not worry about that. But again, this move does reflect the fact that there is a demand for deeper involvement in W Series beyond just regular sponsorship to the series as in general. That there are parties that are involved in making this a more interesting sport, that they are invested in the W Series and what it stands for and its mission. So this innovative structure should support continuous growth and long-term strategies for W Series. Talking about long-term strategies for W Series, I have a question for you, Vedant. So what is next? What is like a next step for W Series? Obviously, there's prize money involved, and Jamie Chadwick, who is the defending champion this season, ended up being a reserve driver for
Williams
F1, right? But what is the next step for drivers in W Series? Should W Series run a team in F3 or F2 as the next step for those who win? Who finish first and second in the W Series championship? Will these new sponsorships, from Veloce, Puma, and all of these teams, allow these brands basically to sponsor a seat in F2 or F3 series based on the performances of their drivers? So is there a structure that W Series could work on, not just with these sponsors, but also by themselves, sponsor a couple seats in F2 or F3, or just for driver development in general, the way, we had the FIA karting, I don't remember, FIA for girls series where, Maya Wegg ended up with the Ferrari Driver Academy. So something like that, could W Series, bring about that change and help not just give women drivers a platform to showcase their skills and move into Formula One, but also help them step into the next series or move up that ladder in the Formula Series.
Yeah, you bring up a brilliant point, because providing the platform is one thing, and helping them move forward is the natural next step. I'm not entirely sure that W Series themselves will sponsor a seat in Formula 3 or Formula 2 for that matter. Formula 2 is way too expensive for W Series to sponsor a seat. Formula 3 is still, arguably possible. But W Series have said, and with the team structure in place right now, that from 2022 onwards, they are looking forward to more integrated teams, and it will still be a spec series. It might still be run by High-Tech, but there will be more teams, and I think a future step might be teams like High-Tech, Carlin, MP Sport, and all these Trident, Prema, all these junior Formula giants to get a team in W Series. And that would be, it would be great for W Series, it would be great for the drivers, and it would be great for the teams themselves to get involved in women motorsport and get involved in W Series. And if a driver performs good in W Series, you can give them a seat in Formula 3, because Formula 3 has 3 seats per 3 drivers per team. So that
is exactly what I was coming to. Like even if W Series doesn't sponsor a seat, hopefully High-Tech GP that does run teams in F2 and F3, based on the performance of the drivers in the W Series, they could offer one of these drivers a seat in F2 or F3. And I think that is the next step for High-Tech GP too as a team. And like you said, if Prema and Carlin get involved, sky is the limit after that for these drivers. F2 and F3 based on merit should not be an issue if they can perform that well.
Yeah, definitely. And as Williams have a driver in W Series and Aston Martin have a driver in W Series, more Formula 1 teams can get involved with that. Obviously, Maya Wegg is with Ferrari and she's currently in Formula 4, I think. So as she, grows, comes to W Series in the future, if she does, so that Ferrari will have a driver in W Series. So that is something which should grow. like the major teams in motorsport should be affiliated with W Series, and be
Yeah,
it
they should be
be
actively
it
involved.
be it European motorsport and or be it American motorsport, Andretti or Penske, and all these guys can also come to W Series and get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. It being a junior series, there's no reason that IndyCar teams should not be looking at W Series to sponsor some series. Maybe W Series could go, race with the US 2000 series there, or maybe a support series for IndyCar, something like that. And that's an interesting point you bring up. I didn't think about that. So hopefully, the W Series people are working hard to, make this platform as big as possible. But that's really all from my side. Anything else from you, Vedant, this weekend?
No, nothing more to add. I mean, we had a pretty straightforward race in that regard, because even in the pit stops there were not much shuffling up. So hopefully Austrian GP next weekend will bring up a better race, just like we had Austrian GP 2020, the first race of the season last year, with Lewis Hamilton falling back after that after that penalty, Lando Norris getting that podium, and Charles Leclerc getting the podium after defying whatever Ferrari could
All
provide
odds.
him. Yeah. So
Absolutely, but in no means was this a bad race. Definitely not as interesting as the other ones we have had this season, and also a little disappointing since a lot of fans were expecting rain at some point.
it
throughout
rained
the
after the
weekend,
race, as usual.
like always,
Formula One.
like always.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is this Formula One no rain bubble somehow. I don't know what the FIA or the F1 does, but they've definitely got that one thing down, that it won't rain during the weekend. But thank you once again, Vedant, for joining me this weekend on the Motorsport Better podcast, and I'll catch you again next week. And that'll be all from my side.